Hi, this is Christian and welcome to NFL Updates Express, your weekly dose of NFL news, coming your way, fantasy analysis. Today we are talking about NFL fantasy football. We will discuss breakout players and who will score the most points for each position. First up, Dylan.
This year there will be many breakout players, but one caught my eye. He's not the most well-known running back there is, but Reggie Bush could score major points this year. Why? Because the Dolphins lost a key part of their passing game, Brandon Marshall. So the Dolphins will have to resort to Bush. Christian?
My breakout player is Panthers wide receiver Brandon LaFell. With mediocre wide receiver Legadou Nene shipped to the Dolphins via free agency, LaFell was moved to the number 2 wide receiver spot next to Steve Smith, and he should increase his stats with less wide receivers available. LaFell should get about 1,000 yards. Next up, Dylan's fantasy QB pick.
There are a bunch of great quarterbacks out there, including Drew Brees, Cam Newton, and Aaron Rodgers. But this year, Tom Brady should generate the most points as a quarterback. He'll be driven by the Super Bowl loss last year and give fantasy players that have him a big boost. Try and grab him if you haven't already drafted yet. Now Christian's QB pick.
There are many great choices at QB, including Rodgers, Brees, Newton, Stafford, Rivers, and Roethlisberger. But from a fantasy standpoint, Tom Brady is the best because of new additions Jabbar Gaffney and Brandon Lloyd now on the Patriots. Brady should easily be a top 3 fantasy player overall. Next, Dylan with his running back.
When you really think about it, there are a ton of running backs that stand out. Maurice Jones-Drew, LaShawn McCoy, Marshawn Lynch, Chris Johnson, Darren Sproles, and Matt Forte. So it's hard to choose just one to do great. But I finally picked Arian Foster. The Texans will split their game equally between Andre Johnson and Foster, giving Arian lots of chances to score big points for fantasy players. He's a must-have for the 2012-2013 season.
I was stuck for which running back would score the most points. Rice or Forte? Rice or Forte? Rice. Or Forte. In the end, I picked Ray Rice. Flacco typically doesn't score many points because they hand it off to who else? Ray Rice. Ray Rice will lead the league in rushing and in fantasy points. Next, Dylan for wide receiver candidate.
This year, it'll be a battle between Larry Fitzgerald of the Arizona Cardinals and Megatron Calvin Johnson of the Detroit Lions for their top wide receiver spot. But the Cardinals quarterback, John Skelton, well, let me be honest with you, stinks. I mean, he's okay, but he's not the best. So it'll be tough to get yards for Fitzgerald without a good quarterback. So Calvin Johnson will generate the most points with Stafford and be the top fantasy wide receiver. Now for Christian.
Fitzgerald, Calvin Johnson, Steve Smith, Roddy White, and Andre Johnson could all be considered as a number 1 wide receiver. But this year, a different wide receiver on your fantasy team will emerge as the top wide receiver. His name is A.J. Green. Andy Dalton always goes to green. This year, he should not be different. Look for this wide receiver named A.J. Green to top 1,000 yards once again. This time, Dylan with his tight end.
Tight ends have really become a huge part of offensive lineups, with stars like Vernon Davis, Rob Gronkowski, and Antonio Gates. But the one that will make the most points will be New Orleans' Jimmy Graham. Gronk and Davis will be right up there with him though. Jimmy has really helped the Saints, and he will help fantasy players that have him too. Now for Christians.
Tight ends are very important now, and Vernon Davis should be the top tight end in the game this year. After having a breakout postseason, Davis should continue this and be a top 20 player in fantasy points overall. Vernon is capable of getting to 1,000 yards, but with Randy Moss and Mario Manningham, that could be a tough task.
Defense. It's a big part of fantasy football, and there are great lineups out there, such as the Baltimore Ravens and the Chicago Bears. But this year, try to pick up the 49ers D. They are sure to be stars this year, so start them whenever possible. Now for Christian's lineup.
Defense. When you think of NFL defenses, you think of the Chicago Bears, the Baltimore Ravens, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. But the San Francisco 49ers D is the best defense on the freaking planet. If this D makes it past round 8, it will be a great bargain. The 49ers defense is your best choice for your 2012 fantasy team.
Sebastian Janikowski, Robbie Gould, and Mason Crosby are all fantastic kickers and will generate many fantasy points for your team. But my pick is 49ers kicker David Akers. He had a great season last year and should have another this year. Akers is so successful because their offense just can't always get it done in the red zone. So David comes in and just hits field goal after field goal, PAT after PAT. So grab him when you draft. He guarantees success.
Sebastian Janikowski is your best option for kicker if David Akers is no longer available. He is great for long distance kicks from 40 plus, 50 plus, even 60 plus yard field goals. I would recommend keeping only one kicker on your fantasy team though. Next up, Dylan for his return man.
The last choice is for the best return man. I know, it isn't a fantasy position, but if someone is a good returner, you can just put them in your wide receiver slot. That's a great strategy. So my choice is pretty obvious. Devin Hester. He can run back nearly every punt or kickoff. It seems like he could get at least 10 yards every single return if he wanted to. Devin Hester. Pick him up. What do you think, Christian?
I'm with you, Dylan. Devin Hester is ridiculous at returning punts and kickoffs. With the Devin package in Chicago, he should have an increased role in the third wide receiver spot. He would be great for a bye week replacement at the wide receiver spot.